He came here to build his fire. Stick by stick, stride by stride, breath after scorching breath, always faster, hotter, higher. We came here to feel that fire.
He just had that, whatever that is, I don't know. Actors have it, singers have it, some people have it, some people don't. Most people don't. He had a lot of it.
He was the benchmark that we all tried to, measure ourselves against.
He was so ferociously competitive in his sport. He understood that he was getting close to the limits in ways that few people do.
Of all the great athletes that have worn our products on the field of battle, we made a statue of only one of them, and that was Steve Prefontaine.
To us, he was Pre. It was more than a name, it was a condition, a fanfare, a heralding of something beyond winning, above the sport, off the track. Pre. No one who saw him ever forgot him. Arms and legs pumping out of that last turn, lips pulled back, eyes shooting up at the scoreboard clock. Not at the finish line, at the time. Pre. He held all 7 American records from 2 to 10,000 meters. At 21, he challenged the world in one of the greatest Olympic races of all time, and later turned down a fortune for a shot at the world record. The story goes that he told the race promoter to keep it. I run best when I run free. Pre never made it to that race.
This morning, one of America's finest distance runners, Steve Prefontaine, was killed in an automobile accident in Eugene, Oregon. He died a little more than 4 hours after he had run the second fastest 5,000 meters in American history. He was 24 years old.
The fact that he died so young meant, I think, that we're left with just a feeling of so much unfilled talent, so much unfilled promise, so much that could have happened.
I'll never forget when I heard that Steve Prefontaine had been killed. It was like I just felt sick. I felt sick to my stomach and just could not believe it. And I remember going to track practice that day, and it was like a funeral. And I mean, everybody was talking about it. Everyone was blown away. And the same thing happened when John Lennon was killed. The same kind of feeling of anyone but them.
It was the golden age of track and field, the 60s. Runners rose up everywhere. These men were heroes. Spectators flocked to see what was the world's second most popular sport. In America, the crowds came here, to Oregon's Hayward Field, the Carnegie Hall of Track. Records are carved into these old bleachers. 3 Olympic trials have been held here, plus a slew of national championships. Alberto Salazar ran here, and Henry Roanoke, Edwin Moses, Carl Lewis, Mary Decker Slaney. They all ran here, all cheered on by the Oregon fans, all memorable. But only one was absolutely unforgettable. You can't understand Steve Prefontaine without understanding where he came from. Coos Bay, Oregon, is lumber country. From the hillside shriek of the saws to the thunder of the docks. Things have always been tough in Coos Bay. Citizens get tough or get out. Ray Prefontaine was a welder and carpenter in the mills. During World War II, he'd met his wife in Germany and brought her home to the Oregon coast. Ray and Elfrida had 3 children, Nita, Steve, and Linda. Steve was the one that was always chasing the dog, charging out in the rain without a jacket, always looking for some way to prove he was as tough as anyone. In Coos Bay, that pretty much meant sports. But in junior high, young Prefontaine was told he was too small for the head-to-head kind of sports, and that set him smoldering.
You either got involved in athletics or you got involved in drugs and something a little less desirable. And he's always talked about he could have gone the other way, but he found something that he was good at and loved, and the rest is history.
He fanned and fed that smolder, running in the dunes, along the docks, and on the cinders. He ran till it hurt, when muscles scream and lungs beg for mercy. He was hot to see what those big jocks were made of when they had to go shoulder to shoulder instead of head to head. One day he even challenged the football team to a scrimmage under this condition. They all had to run a 10K first. This brashness flared at age 16. His goals were mighty for a boy from Coos Bay. "I'll run in the Olympics someday," he'd tell anybody who would listen.
Well, I was working and we didn't see too many meets. And one day a lady came and said, "Mrs. Prefontaine, you should go to the meets. Your son, it's Olympic stuff." I still remember the words.
In Eugene, 90 miles inland, plenty of Olympic dreams had been realized. Oregon assistant track coach Bill Dillinger had competed in 3 Olympic Games. Dillinger's head coach was the legendary Bill Bowerman. He'd led 3 Oregon teams to NCAA championships. A brilliant, blunt, innovative, stubborn Oregon original, Bowerman had been a single-wing quarterback and a quarter-miler for Oregon's first great track coach, Bill Hayward. As a major in World War II, he had negotiated the surrender of an entire German army. As the University of Oregon track coach, Bowerman quickly made his reputation as a shaper of champions. He tinkered with every aspect of performance. He experimented with all-weather track surfaces. He taught himself cobbling and made featherlight racing spikes for his men. One of these men was Phil Knight. Together they started a small shoe company. It would become bigger. Impressed by New Zealand's great distance runners, Bowerman went down under to visit with their coach, Arthur Lydiard. There he saw great numbers of citizens out running, or as Lydiard called it, jogging.
He was real big on jogging when he came back from New Zealand and thought that it had application to the United States. And I was somewhat skeptical. I says, "You'll never get Americans to do all that." And that was one of those things I was very happy to be wrong about.
But there was different business on Bowerman's mind in the fall of 1968. It was that little hellcat on the coast, Prefontaine. He sent Dillinger to watch him run.
That fall I went to the state cross-country meet. It would have been Pre's junior year in high school. I had my binoculars and I was probably a good half mile, 700 yards away from the start. And I saw this guy as they were called to the line to the set position. But it was the look in his eyes, even from a half mile distance, the intensity that I saw in his face as the gun went off, that I thought, that's got to be Pre.
In the spring of 1969, the smolder bloomed into full flame. Prefontaine set a national high school 2-mile record that would stand the rest of his life. He was a statewide star, and recruiters from colleges across the country clamored for his attention. But Pre couldn't understand why the Oregon head coach wasn't drowning him in cards and letters. The fact was, Bill Bowerman hated recruiting, considered himself a teacher, a guru even, and preferred students who sought him out to prima donnas who needed to be courted. A letter from Bowerman was rare.
Somebody said, why didn't you pay more attention to Pre? Well, I paid about as much attention as I would pay to anybody, because you start making love to some high school kid too early, and his head gets bigger and bigger.
One of his heroes naturally was Bill Bowerman from the University of Oregon. I mean, when Steve finally got the letter from Bill Bowerman, that just absolutely blew his mind. I mean, that he was in seventh heaven.
If I join the tail kissers, I'm just another donkey looking for another body to come out and run here. If I want to teach him anything, if I have something to offer him, we'll find that out after he gets here.
In Pre's case, Bowerman would break his own rule and write that letter. But Prefontaine wanted to find out a few things before he reached Oregon. In June, he was invited to Miami for a shot at the U.S. national team. It was a long shot at best.
I noticed this this little kid hanging around the athletes in the dorm where everybody was housed. And he seemed to be especially hanging around the distance runners, maybe Jerry Lindgren and Jack Batchelor and Frank Shorter. But he was just a little kid, you know, obviously, just somebody out there getting autographs or something.
You'd heard the words about this hot high school kid from Oregon, and he had a chance to make the team. And I really didn't know who he was.
I was a senior in college at the time, so I'm going, hey, pretty interesting. This young kid is pretty darn good, because I recollect he ran about 8:42 for 2 miles at the time, which incidentally at that time was faster than I had run for 2 miles. So I was impressed.
2 nights later, I saw him again in the shadows of the stadium in the evening as the 5,000-meter race was going to start. He's standing beside the competitors, and he's right in the middle of it, and he's got his Marshfield High uniform on. I said, oh my God, that's Steve Prefontaine.
In this particular race, Tracy Smith and Jerry Lindgren finished in a dead heat for first.
They turned at the finish line and to watch who was finishing behind them and making the team, and who should they see but this young man from Coos Bay, the future, running up at them.
First of all, here's a freshman that comes in and he's the #1 guy on the whole team. And I'll have to admit, there was some jealousy towards that. And here's an 18-year-old kid coming in. That year he gets front cover of Sports Illustrated. Pre had a little bit of that arrogance, there's no doubt about it.
It was 1969, and there was great division on the Oregon campus. People were taking sides. Prefontaine, as opinionated as anyone, would wage his protests on the practice field. Bowerman was the establishment.
I said, Pre, next week I want you to run the 2 mile. That was before we had the 3 mile or the 5,000. He says, I don't run the 2 mile. And he turned and walked off, and I said, well, come back here, I want to tell you something. Where are you going to run next week? And he turned and walked off again, and he got about 3 steps back. He came back and said, well, I'll run the 2 mile, but I'm not going to like it. And he didn't like it, but he broke the school record.
His new Oregon teammates weren't sure what to make of this cocky Coos Bay kid, especially freshman classmate Mac Wilkins, who didn't take well to Prefontaine's overflowing self-regard.
I called him World, and that was short for world famous. You come to college as a freshman and you've been on the national team and you have your USA national sweats, which is, that's as good as gold if you're a track athlete, and you're the hero of the town, and you've been to Europe competing, you're world famous.
The time that Prefontaine came to Oregon in 1969, so much preceded him, I really think set the stage. I mean, you had all of Bowerman's footwear development, so shoes were really getting better. The tracks were definitely getting faster with the experimentation Bill did with all-weather surfaces, so you're getting the benefit of a faster track. And with Bowerman's jogging classes, you had a very educated crowd. So Steve showed up with all this, maybe not seeming to fit together with other than the fact that Bowerman was kind of in the middle of it all. He was the instigator, he was the catalyst, he was the promoter. But now you really had somebody to promote all this around. Then you began to realize this guy is bigger than life. I mean, there's something about him that has this ability to absorb all this energy, this electricity that's in the stands, and you were part of it. I mean, you were part of that electricity. You were helping provide some of that was going down to him, and he was providing it back up to you.
You remember how loud it was in Kansas for the last half mile of the Prairie Ryan race? I said, yeah. He says, it was like that when Pre came out on the field about an hour before his race.
To run against Pre in Oregon was a mistake if you really thought you were going to try to win, because Pre not only had confidence, but he inhabited races and competition so much that even though you didn't want to be, you were intimidated by his aura.
I was in the zone. I wasn't really thinking about him, his aura. I was thinking about my aura and putting it to his aura.
Well, I'd like to break some more records, and I'm going to Oakland in 2 weeks to run against George Young, who holds the world's record in 2 mile, and the Russian who beat me this summer in Leningrad. And I'm looking forward to racing those two.
Long-term goal still 72 Olympics.
Long-term goal still 72 Olympics, yes.
As he closed in on his Olympic dream, the kid was becoming the man of American track. In one stretch, he won 21 straight college meets. He broke the American 5,000 and 3,000 meter records. He was the NCAA cross-country champion going away. Burning legends, the likes of world record holder Jim Ryan, fighting his way to that inside lane, surging out ahead of the pack, challenging those who were in his way, loving those who understood, connecting with his fans like no one else ever would.
It was like someone meeting a rock star. I mean, for me at that age, yeah, Prefontaine, could not talk, could not get eye contact, you know, dry mouth. Just it's like this is my idol. This is what I would like to do, to be able to run like Pre, and yet I was a sad, pathetic joke.
Pre was always the first to speak out against what he saw as unfairness. The world of track and field in the early 1970s gave him a big target.
I think maybe that's the thing that bothered him the most, was hypocrisy. Because there's a lot of it anyway in life, and there was a lot in the leadership of track and field at that time. And you know, he called a spade a spade. He didn't pull punches. And that's something I always admired. He wasn't politically correct. He didn't know what that meant.
You know, he was sort of the villain. I mean, he ripped Los Angeles about the smog, and I hate it here, and I can't run here, and why does anybody run here? And then people would come out and watch him. He turned out to be quite a showman.
Showman, hero, rebel, Prefontaine lived on the edge. He was always moving through life in the fast lane. He broke all the stereotypes of distance runners.
We were like salt and pepper. You know, I was the bland person. I was introverted. I was married at the time. I was not a party goer. And Steve was the pepper. He was the spice. He was outgoing, extroverted, single, putting the moves on everybody. And we were just like Mutt and Jeff.
Pre's out-front personality was an extension of his running style. Pre was a classic front runner. Though he had good sprinting speed, others were faster. To have the best chance of winning, he had to break free of his competition before the home stretch. So he trained, twice a day, every day. He trained to begin a long, killing drive with as much as a mile to go. He trained to force himself into more pain than any pursuer could bear.
You know, he could carry his maximum effort longer and harder than most people could. And anybody got in a race with him knew that there was going to be blood on the track by the time it was through, because Pre was going to run as hard as he could, and if they wanted to beat him. I remember the other thing, he told me one time, he said, you know, somebody may beat me, but they're going to have to bleed to do it.
Everything he lived for, breathed, believed in, dreamed of was running. Frank Shorter, Jack Batchelor, myself, and a number of other athletes of that era who were distance runners had other things in our lives.
I couldn't understand why one of the best-looking girls on campus would come up and ask him for a date 2 weeks down the road, and he said, well, I don't know, I have to check my schedule. But basically all this behavior that may have been abrasive or seemed cocky it was just him being focused and being honest, and nobody else was that focused or that intense.
if you're a runner, you're never completely satisfied unless you get a world's record. And I think it's a good indication of what I'm going to be doing this spring. I hope it's a good indication. This is my first meet of the new year, so that's not a bad way to start out the new year again.
Did you have the national record in mind, or was this a tune-up for the trials?
Well, to tell you the truth, my grandmother went in the hospital 3 nights ago, and I went and saw her Friday morning before I headed up towards Portland. And I told her I was going to dedicate this race to her, and I told her I was going to break the American record for her.
You did it in style.
Well, I hope so. It's not the fastest time in the world, but it's in there anyway.
What about the trials? Was this a good tune-up for you, do you think, to get the speed in there?
Very good.
In 1972, the Olympic trials at Hayward Field would boast a strong field of Olympic hopefuls. 800-meter world record holder Dave Waddle, world record pole vaulter Bob Seagren, world record miler Jim Ryan, world record shot putter Brian Oldfield, and American record holder Frank Shorter were among the big names that would pack the Hayward stands. But these were Pre's people, and the electricity was building for Prefontaine's 5,000-meter showdown with the tough and experienced George Young.
At one time, I remember standing in the middle of the field and yelling at Pre as loud as I could and not being able to hear my own voice. So it became a deafening noise that you couldn't even hear yourself.
Pre's relentless pace left Young far behind. It was a new American record of 13:22.8, just 6 seconds off the world mark. In celebration, he grabbed a Stop Pre t-shirt and blazed a victory lap before the dazzled and frenzied crowd.
Your strategy this evening, was it to go as fast as you could, and were you able to do that, or what was it?
I was actually slow at the 2 mile mark. I was supposed to be 8:40, and I was 8:46, so I was slow. I realized I better pick up the pace, otherwise something might happen.
Who's foremost in your mind in Munich?
Well, there's a lot of them. There's going to be 12 people in the final event, and if I'm there, there's going to be 12 people that could win it.
How do you feel? You're number one now.
Well, all I can say is I hope I can stay fit, and if I can run like this in Munich, I think I'm going to be pretty hard to stop.
Could anyone stop Pre? That would be a question soon answered in Munich, where the world's toughest runners awaited the outspoken kid from America.
Steve always sounded confident. He would not say, well, I'm just going to wait and see what happens. He would get out there and make predictions and name names.
You know, he'd shoot off his mouth, and then it would end up running in Europe, and he'd wonder how the hell it got there, and it wasn't quite what he said or wasn't quite what he meant. I mean, he attacked the whole amateur athletic structure every other day.
There was big headlines in Finnish papers, and you know, there was an interview of Steve Prefontaine, and he said that I'm gonna run the last mile 4 minutes, and I'm gonna win 5,000 meters.
I certainly always felt that the problem he had was he didn't come and race us enough, and I felt that he was very, very good in America. And I can always remember talking to him later, in Munich for sure, and he said to me, I'll run inside 4 minutes for the last mile. And I always got the impression that he thought he was the only one that could run inside 4 minutes for the last mile, whereas I knew I could, but I also knew 4 others that could as well.
Well, you can look at it 2 ways. You can go over and get international experience, and you can run against these people, and you know what to expect from them, and you know what they can do, and then they'll know what you can do, or you can stay away from them, and then you can let them wonder.
In July of 1972, Prefontaine would leave his adoring U.S. fans and take his pre-Olympic training to Europe. In a series of pre-Olympic tune-up meets, Pre would set fire to yet another American record, this time on foreign cinders. I'd have broken the world record if I hadn't run the 1500 last night, he claimed in boastful innocence.
We were in Oslo, Norway, and I was sitting up in the stands, and he and Bowerman were out doing a workout all by themselves in Oslo Stadium. And Steve went out, and for his he warmed up, obviously. The first thing he did in a workout was he paced himself to a 4-minute mile. And he went out very even split. I had a stopwatch, and it was a 62 flat, 3 flat. I think it was 4:00 point something. And then he did a ladder. Then he did his workout. But it was like, was he ready for the Olympics in '72? He sure was.
Midway through the 20th Summer Games of Munich, all Olympic innocence went up in flames. The Olympics would be forever changed.
There are men with guns beginning to train those guns on the rooms where the 2 heads were sticking out a moment ago of the Arab guerrilla lookouts. This is happening now, if you can possibly believe that, at the games of the 20th Olympiad.
7 Palestinian terrorists had slipped into the Olympic Village, invaded Israel's wrestling team's quarters, killed 2 team members, and took 9 more hostage. The terrorists airlifted the hostages to a small airport. There, German sharpshooters opened fire, but the terrorists detonated their explosives. All hostages were killed. The eyes of the world, once reserved for national spirit, fell upon grief and terror. The remaining Olympic events were postponed for a day. Every athlete had to search his heart for the courage to go on. Prix had the courage, but his stride had been broken.
They closed off the Olympic Village. I remember going to one of the isolated areas in the Olympic Village and having Prix climb over the fence and get out of there. And I remember one day taking him into Austria the day of the kidnapping just to get him away from it, and he was quite upset. In fact, it felt like he did not want to run in the Olympics, that this is not what the Olympics were about.
The initial reaction amongst all of us, we were all rooming together in the same room. We could look out from our balcony and see the room where all the Israelis had been housed. We could see the masked gunmen outside the rooms on their balconies. We all would stand there and look over on that day, and we thought early on that, nothing's worth this. Nothing's worth human life.
I felt very, very bad, very emotional, and it was very easy for me to make a decision to go home. I mean, the Germans called it the Heitere Spiele, which means the happy games. It was supposed to be one party. Well, I think if you have a party and people get killed, you don't continue the party.
Took some real talking to try and get him in a frame of mind for racing. And as I told him, there are some guys that you're going to be racing that are going to use this as an advantage to run against people like you that's going to be shook up over this.
Had the terrorists spoiled it all for us? And the resulting answer among all the athletes was no. We're going to continue with this. We're not going to let the terrorists steal this from us.
But it is Prefontaine and Poetemans setting the pace. The others will have to catch them. Norpoth.
After a day's postponement, Prix would run for his Olympic life. Only 2 runners from each heat would be guaranteed a place in the finals.
3 great runners right now, and only 2 of them can be sure of the final.
Prefontaine and Poetemans shared the lead, eventually leaving Norpoth behind. Once sure of securing a position in the final, Prix saved himself and coasted in, while Poetemans finished with an Olympic record.
He liked very much to race and also to take the pace, and he's never waiting 5 meters, always up. He was passing very quickly and straight away, not looking after, going.
There are the 2 men who moved to the final. Emil Poetemans of Belgium, Steve Prefontaine of the United States. Step 1 has been taken by the confident young man from Oregon.
To win the 5,000 final, Prefontaine had to beat a field of powerful and experienced men with diverse running styles. The front runners would force the pace in an attempt to outlast the kickers, who had speed in reserve for a final blast at the finish line. The favorite was Lasse Viren of Finland, who had already won the 10,000 in world record time.
Steve Prefontaine will be the Olympic 5,000 meter champion. I think he will break the world's record at 5,000 meters, but I think he will have to do it in Montreal. Because today, Steve Prefontaine, 21 years old, is running up against the very big boys.
But one thing is for sure, that at that period, there were some very, very classy individuals in the 5,000 and 10,000 metres around. I mean, Vartanen, Viren, Puttimans, Prefontaine, myself, Stewart.
There was so many characters in it, larger than life people in it.
All young pretenders, waiting to take over and wanting to be the best.
And they were the superstars of the track. I mean, there's no question about that.
I think that Stewart's prediction of the last mile in 4 minutes is not unrealistic. That is what Steve Prefontaine will have to run if he's going to win this event today.
And that was how I saw it, really. I thought it would be hard, it'll be a very fast race, and it'll probably be down to Viren and myself, with Prefontaine trying to chase us down in the last kilometre.
Prefontaine told me the other night, or about a week ago, standing in the lobby of the Sheraton München Hotel, he said, what I'm going to try to do is work it out so it'll be a pure guts race at the end, and if it is, I'm the only one who can win.
I certainly felt that Steve Prefontaine was very capable of winning that race. I mean, he had run some really capable races that summer leading up to that, and I just felt that there were other certainly outstanding runners, but that he could do it.
Now David Bedford has decided to get into it. Boy, what strategy must be going out there? This is the thinking time, isn't it?
Nobody was thinking during that first mile.
I was stunned, I was appalled at how they walked through 2 miles. And just as right now, I was speechless. I kept yelling at the TV for Steve, run, take the lead, or whatever, go for it.
And Steve Prefontaine is going to take the lead.
1 mile to go.
4 laps to go, that's it.
Pre has got to run that 4-minute mile now. He's got to.
No man at the age of 21 has ever won this long, tough, and thinking man's race, the 5,000 meters. Viren taking the lead. Viren up there ahead of Steve Prefontaine. And Stewart, here comes Gammoudi, up even with them.
They're really going to pick up these next paces. Now this is Viren's moment. This is when Viren makes his long drive.
Lasse already had done the world record, so he had confidence on his kick too. But he didn't have a specific tactic. He just wanted to be ready when the race really starts.
Prefontaine going for the lead again. It's become a tense duel now. This could be a great race, a historic race. Let's see if it develops that way.
Pre is running a gutsy race. What a kick he's putting on. This is 600 yards to go, and he's trying an all-out kick.
I always thought that the type of runner he was going to be difficult to beat. But because of the type of runner he was, people like myself and certainly Viren, we would be very difficult for him to beat because we were pretty strong, but we were very fast.
It's going to be a last lap fight. Gammoudi has moved into third. Here's Viren going for the lead. It seems impossible that Prefontaine can outkick Viren.
Or Gammoudi.
Vartanen is no place. Vartanen will not be a factor with his fabled kick.
Gammoudi
is going for his second gold medal of the games. Mohamed Gammoudi is right with him, and so is Steve Prefontaine. The kid is showing all the guts in the world. He's hanging in there with the kickers. Prefontaine going for the lead with Gammoudi. Viren is still there. Here comes Prefontaine.
The fact that he could go there with no experience, being his youth that he had, and run that tough impressed me. I mean, it took me 3 Olympics to have the attitude that he had in his first Olympics.
Pre is running a great race. What guts!
Here comes Viren going for his second gold medal. And I think he's going to win it. But Gammoudi could have a kick. I don't think so. Viren's going to win the gold. And here comes the Briton trying to pass Prefontaine for the bronze. It's going to be close. And it was Ian Stewart beating out Steve Prefontaine for the bronze medal as Prefontaine nearly collapsed in the last 5 meters.
You look back at that race in retrospect, he could have been the bronze medalist if he hadn't made the burst down the back stretch. When he went by those guys, I said, well, he doesn't lack for courage. And I says, I just hope he hasn't gone out too soon. And of course he had, but he was going to die trying. But he would rather have gone for the gold and tried for that than get a sure bronze, and that just really typified the man.
No, I was down by 10 or 15 metres coming out of the last bend, came past Prefontaine in the straight. In fairness to Prefontaine, he ran better than I did that day. I probably didn't deserve to get a medal, really, not the way I ran.
he was crestfallen. I mean, he was just crushed. He said, "I've got nothing to say," and he started off. And all of a sudden, it was just like this explosion inside of my head, and I said, "Hey, wait a minute." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Look, you got to talk to me." He says, "I don't have to talk to you." And I said, "Hey, wait, what about all those people back in Eugene?" He says, "What do you mean?" I said, the people in Hayward Field, and Pre's people. I said, "They've lived this race with you." I said, "They can understand what happened, and we've got to talk." And he said, "Well, I don't know what to say." And I said, "Well, let's talk about the race." I said, how bad did you do?" I said, "How old are you?" And I just had to keep him going because he could just walk off and I couldn't catch him, obviously. As tired as he was, I still couldn't catch him. So I said, "How old are you?" And he said, 21 or 22, I don't really remember what he was. And I said, "And so you finished 4th in the world at that age. How bad's that?" "Well," he said, "that's not too bad." And I said, "Did you run for 3rd or 2nd? No, you ran to win. You took the lead with a mile to go, you ran your butt off, and you finished 4th. How bad's that?" "Well, no, it wasn't that bad." What he needed was somebody to put their arm around him, to kind of hug him and say, "It's okay, we understand. Pre's people understand." And I was sort of the emissary for that, I guess. And so, goodness, he started talking, and 20 minutes later, he was all pumped up again. And I remember David Bedford walking by, and he shouted at Bedford, he said, "I'll see you in Montreal, and I'll kick your butt."
We both knew on the right day we could have won it. We knew that there would be other days in the future. 76 wasn't that far away. We were both young with our whole careers in front of us.
Prefontaine returned to Oregon without an Olympic medal. He'd gone to the edge and over, and now he'd have to find his way back again. This was what Bowerman had prepared him for. The real challenge is in the losing and how you pick yourself up. Pre's fire had been dampened some, but the coals inside were just beginning to burn.
I think what happened to him in the Olympics opened up his eyes, matured him. The longer hair and the sideburns were the rebellious, wasn't going to conform anymore to what he thought he was supposed to do or act or say. And I think that change in his appearance was a change that was going on inside of him. And I suppose some of that was maturing. And probably that I'm going to get you next time.
Certainly he could bat those big brown eyes and twirl that little mustache, and you certainly knew that there was a pursuit in progress.
And I liked that I felt that here's this guy, this stallion of a runner that will take the time to encourage me, who's kind of a novice of a runner.
More popular than ever, Pre's final season at Oregon was brilliant. He set the American record in the 6 mile, ran the best ever collegiate distance double. He won his 4th NCAA 3 mile title, a feat never before accomplished by a collegiate runner.
I said, "Pre, of all your American records, the one I like the best is the fact that you came to Oregon and spent 4 years with never missing a workout, 4 years without ever missing a race." He says, "Coach, I got to tell you, there was a few Saturday mornings when I really didn't feel like running, and he said there were a few races where I had a sore throat or cold, and I knew if I told you, you wouldn't let me race, so I wouldn't tell you."
His college days behind him, Pre fumed over the predicament of the American track athletes. It was the AAU that would feel the brunt of his anger. Though Pre drew tens of thousands of paying fans to stadiums all over the world, he lived on food stamps, travel expenses, and the AAU's allowance of $3 a day.
It was like the grapes of wrath of track with his trailer. I was very surprised when I came to Eugene and confiding in me that he was on food stamps. It was like one of the world's best athletes, and it was quite a contradiction. So, and actually quite a testimony to the way he was, and it was fun. He was a true warrior.
You know, the thing that I've thought about him is what he did is he hung it all out all the time. I mean, the race that I remember the most, the race against Dave Waddle to raise money to build a stadium. He sets himself up as the perfect rabbit.
And he said, why don't you come up to Eugene before we go over to Scandinavia, and we'll run a mile together and we'll try for the world record. He says, I'll lead you on the way, you'll have a great time. This was 5 days before the race was to be held, and within a 5-day period of time, they put together a beautiful race, a major meet. The stands were simply packed. You know, you're in Pre's backyard, and to get on his home turf and to run against him was just a thrill. And Steve led the whole race until 200 meters to go. When he said, we'll go after the world record, he put me in a great position for a great time. Here's Steve, you know, the ultimate in pace setting, was going out and charging ahead and still running a great time, and he obviously wanted to win too.
He couldn't run with Dave Waddle in that situation, and he knew it. He set himself up, set Waddle up, and got nailed, and everybody went home happy. And it was how many of us have that kind of guts and that kind of presence to do that?
Waddle, the 800-meter world record holder, had just missed the mile record. Pre was just a second behind. Not bad for a guy who wasn't supposed to be a miler.
Steve forced me to be a rebel. We were outside of the governing body. We were supposed to run in an AAU meet in Germany and Italy, Russia, and they started out in Africa. And we bypassed the African meets. And I can remember just feeling so proud when I'd walk into the team meeting when we gathered together in Germany with Steve, and here Steve and I are walking in, you know, in open defiance of the AAU. They're saying, you better get down here or else.
His off-the-track shots at the AAU became more public. To hell with the love of country, he was quoted. The U.S. expects us to win medals at the Olympics, then forgets about us the other 3 years.
When you'd go to a European track meet and say an obscure Italian hurdler would come up and say, hey, let's go get our money and go partying. We'd go, what money? And we'd find out that our federation was getting our appearance money, and athletes from other countries were getting theirs.
Pre was an angry voice for athletes' rights. He was always in trouble with AAU officials.
He really grabbed that situation by the balls, literally, and confronted the AAU, this old Grand Marshal school of a bunch of old stuffies, and brought up some real uncomfortable situations.
They tried to tell him which races to run, and if they weren't the races against the very finest competition, if they wanted to run dual meets against Poland and he wanted to run against New Zealanders or Finns, and very few as they got better and better who could give him a good race, then we had a conflict.
Over the next year, Pre would set 5 new American records. Despite his feud with the AAU, who's the most popular track athlete in the world.
Well, I don't feel I'm any worse off than I have been in the past. I've caused them probably a lot of embarrassment and a lot of trouble, but I'm not really trying to get under anybody's skin. I'm just trying to bring the problems to a head and an understanding to make the people of this country realize what's happening in amateur athletics. And what's happening is that the amateurs do not have the same benefits as, let's say, the Europeans. And I just like to bring this to the acknowledgement of the public. Running doesn't pay your bills, so you've got to make a lot of sacrifices to be an amateur sport in this country, considering it's so professionally oriented.
He really not only set a tone for his sport, for me at least, he set a tone for this whole company.
That ought to wake up the country club. I am not a role model. People are making me nervous. The guy on the other side of the net's making me nervous.
You're talking 1973. Nike as a brand was only a year old. Steve joined us at that time, and we were all the early pioneers. But Steve was really the catalyst. I mean, he was the reason that we were in business.
He was not only demanding on himself, he was demanding on anybody that was around him, including me, and that he was constantly demanding, you know, better and better shoes for himself and for the running community.
When Prefontaine joined Nike, the company was losing $50,000 a year, and Steve was being paid in shoes. His title was National Public Relations Manager.
There couldn't have been a more perfect athlete than Steve for Nike, because he had a certain level of rebel in him, no question about it. He wasn't a rebel without a cause, he was a rebel with a cause.
The ITA, the new professional track circuit, offered Pre $200,000 to join its ranks. But that would mean sacrificing his amateur status. Any world records would be dismissed, and he would forfeit his opportunity to return to the Olympics. He told the promoter, "I have too much unfinished business to take care of." That spring, he started taking care of that business with a world-class 10K. He was gunning for 76 in Montreal. In May of 1975, Prefontaine swerved again outside the AAU rules. He brought the Finnish national team to Oregon for a series of meets. He was hoping for a rematch with Lasse Viren at Hayward Field.
It was really good for him to see the other aspect of track and field, that it isn't just you show up and run a race and that's all there is to it. On the other hand, I think his main motivation for that Finnish tour was to get the Finns over here during his prime season and just drum them into the track. And of course, at the last moment, Viren wasn't able to make it, and that kind of soured him a bit. But being Pre, he recovered, and it was a very successful tour.
Well, we had a very simple telephone call. He called up and said, "Gee, I really need you to come out and run this race because Viren's backed out and he's not going to be there." And my response was, "Sure."
Despite Pre's disappointment over Viren's cancellation and the stress of organizing the meets, he just missed the American record, easily outdistancing Shorter.
I felt pretty incidental, really, in that last race, even though I finished second. You know, I realized at that point, at that particular distance, he was beyond me. I wasn't going to be able to beat him. I think Steve had winning the gold medal in '76 as his goal. He probably would have gotten down around 3:52 for the mile or 3:51, and that would have been pretty intimidating going into the Olympic Games for anybody thinking they were up against a 3:51 miler.
He was very quick to go from one victory to another challenge. He was not a great celebrator. He was a great party guy. He was a great celebrator of life. So it was fun to see him that night, really enjoying what had happened.
Mac Wilkins would also shine in that meet, beating Kente Kama, the #1 ranked discus thrower in the world.
I thought, my God, I finally got that Prefontaine. I beat him. You know, I'm going to get the headlines and the attention, and finally people will appreciate me. And you know, sadly but ironically, he topped that one.
In Eugene, Oregon, one of America's best hopes for the 1976 Olympics, long-distance runner Steve Prefontaine is dead. Prefontaine killed early this morning with his car flipped over. Prefontaine was 24.
There was a party at Jeff Hollister's that night, and I remember remarking to myself at the time how relaxed he was, how relieved he was, how he really was able to enjoy things, I thought, better then. It seemed to mark a real change in him. And I had to go home early, but my last memory of him was sitting back and talking with his folks about simple things, crabbing, fishing, life, simple life. And it's not a bad last memory.
Had a good time at the party, but there was nothing unusual about him or me. In fact, we were continuing this conversation we've been having off and on all evening about how the success of the Finnish meet would perhaps play into some revamping of the amateur rules in the United States. I said goodnight to him, and we may have even talked about running the next day, and I went to sleep actually feeling very good, like it had been a great evening. And lo and behold, I got awakened early the next morning by Kenny Moore, and he told me that Steve had died heading down the hill.
And he drove off down the hill, and about a minute later came around this curve, and for some reason took such a hard left that he hit the curb here, hit the stone embankment, and flipped over on top of him.
It was obvious to me that somebody had
ridden him off the road, that he'd come around this turn and somebody had made him veer off, and it was just, as I remember it, the bad luck of having that car configured the way it was, that it rolled over on top of him. You know, the old saying that life isn't fair can be very, very true. I mean, it just was not fair.
I remember the last words we saw him at the going away party for the Finns. He said, "Drive careful." And it was kind of late, and we drove, and we were tired, and we looked at the watch, and I said, "Ray, you better quit and take a rest." And usually I don't look at the time. It was 12:30. So I have a feeling that's the time Steve died, that his heart must have been with us.
Pre was probably the most outspoken, honest, competitive man on and off the track certainly that I've ever known. And his loss to our community and to Oregon track and to American track is just one that it's just very difficult to estimate.
After the memorial service at Hayward Field, I was sitting in the east stands and fairly high up, and boy, I'll tell you, I think I was probably the last one to leave the stadium. I couldn't go. You know, at the time I had a sense of loss, because here was a guy that I kind of knew fairly well, but not that well. I don't think anybody knew him that well. And now that I look back on it, it's even more a sense of loss, because I really feel like we had a lot in common.
I guess what made me so sad was that he's me. You know, even though maybe he's cocky and maybe I'm not as cocky, or he's different than me, there's more of him that's like me than that's not like me. The 20-mile runs on Sunday, the hard intervals, I mean, that stuff, we're brothers that way. He always made the tempo sweet. He made it tough for us, and he taught us a lot in doing so.
Even today, decades later, we still follow along Pre's trail. His footprints defiant of the blowing sand, his flickering image burning in the sunlight between trees and lakes, bounding through the waves, a shadow marking the docks and dunes, his spirit still blazing the track, echoing in the stands, Pre, Pre, Pre.
Well, there's a lot of factors that make me run. Probably the biggest one is that I enjoy it, or I have acquired an enjoyment for it after so many years of running. It's part of my life now. Another reason would have to be the Olympic Games and trying for a gold medal. And the third thing would have to be competition. I love to compete against people, and not just track and field, but almost anything.
For me, at least, the moral of Steve Prefontaine is essentially fighting the good fight.
He was probably one of the bravest, and he might eventually have been the best. He's probably the greatest runner America never had, because he never had his day, and that's the sad thing.
His aggressiveness, his tenacity, his vision of what's right perceptually for the athletes would have made things different.
Today, there's life in track and field. Things have changed, and I hope Steve, if he was alive, he would have seen what happened today. He would see the fruit of what he was fighting for the athletes in this country and all over the world.
It was around 1980 that we had the Cascade runoff. I would say that some athletes buckled, and you know, I, in my own dreams, wish maybe Pre had been around, and despite the under-the-table backdoor agreements between certain lead athletes and Olin Cassell, maybe Pre would have been there and said, no, this is not right.
Watching him race, to me, you can see him push. You just see that desire. when he's fading away, he pushes deeper and deeper, and I believe he breaks his pain threshold by that way and continues on to go faster. And that's what I would like. If I could be anything like him, that's what I'd like.
And it seemed like whenever he came out onto the track, the sun came out.
Whatever gave him all of the drive, I don't know, but I'd like to buy it and sell it.
When he won the NC2A after ripping his toe up, he caught his toe on a bolt sticking up out of the concrete around a swimming pool. I mean, it was a pretty bad injury and probably would have kept most people from running. And didn't faze him a bit. I mean, Pre was awfully tough.
I mean, his best friend could be someone in a penitentiary, or some doctor or lawyer upstairs, or whatever. But he didn't classify them as being different. They were all his people.
He is the real James Dean. James Dean was playing Prefontaine before Prefontaine, but he was playing the role. Steve was the authentic, 100% real thing.
If Steve had developed and been a force in the '76 Olympics, that would be for him, of course, been a great thing, but it also meant a lot for distance running in the United States.
American distance running was their #1 profile. He wasn't only a good runner, but he was also a person who could bring publicity to a sport that, at some time needed publicity. So I think American distance running was both a good runner and someone that would have been valuable to the sport through his character and through the way he was.
I was on a run with him one time, Steve, and just he and I were running down Franklin Boulevard, and I jokingly referred to him as the Muhammad Ali of track, and he kind of mumbled something to me at that time. But I was kind of joking with him, but in a joking sense, it was a compliment because, as you know, he's very talkative, but he could back his words up. He just like Ali.
What's really awesome about Steve was how tough he was. Mentally tough, physically tough. I like to think of him as an Oregonian. He's a woggler. He belongs in the Stomper family. Sometimes a great notion.
Oh, he'd probably be in the Oregon Congress right now, being really pissed off about the education of kids in Oregon and the way things are run, and just kind of generally mad about all that kind of stuff.
When was the last time you really did your best and you got through and you said, God, I did my best? That's Steve Prefontaine. He got on the track. He did his best every time, every day. He showed up every day. He worked out every day, and the results was he was the best there was. What a message.